Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Monday, May 8th, 2023. I'm Jer Stay, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. Joining me on Mondays because we've got a ton of sports topics to talk about. Fletcher Sharpe, how are you, sir?
I'm all right. A little bit tired. Had a long sports-filled weekend, so now I'm looking forward to a long sports-filled week.
Well, you know, people were a little surprised that you were not on at Keyworth because you were over at Ford Field covering the Panthers. We are going to get into that in a minute. First, I think we need to talk about this heating up coach selection situation with the Detroit Pistons. As I understand it, there's kind of three finalists right now, and that's going to be Jaron Collins. He is the Pelicans assistant coach. You've got Charles Lee, the Bucks associate head coach, and then you've got Kevin Ollie, the former UConn and overtime elite coach. What do you think of these three options?
I don't want any of those three as a head coach. If that's the final, I really want them to reshuffle the deck. Just no.
Well, I have a question for you. None of these are really elite names. Is this a situation where Detroit just can't pull an elite coach?
No, they want to get someone who they can build with, which is understandable. Like, you don't really have the elite coach who's like, come out of retirement and be like, I want to lead this team, because coaches want to make sure they can do something where they're not coming into a program that they're going to be losing. Like, you're not going to get Phil Jackson to come out of retirement and be like, I'll coach the Pistons, because he knows the first few years are going to be rocky. Like, maybe even 1 year is going to be rocky, but it might be rocky enough to the point to where it could, affect your legacy. So you have to get a young coach or a first-time coach because they're willing to just take any job. But the fact that they're coming off of potentially getting the first overall pick after 2 years of, not being great, no winning coach or coach with a winning record for their career is going to want to step into that and be like, I'll take over. So you got to find some people who have not been head coaches at the professional level before and then say, all right, I'll take a shot on them, because either they could be great like Eric Spoelstra was with the Heat, or they could be terrible like Rick Pitino was with the Celtics.
So let's talk about this reshuffle and let's walk through them, why you don't like him. Jaron Collins.
I just don't think he's a really good coach. And no disrespect to him. I know he has 3 championship rings with the Golden State Warriors. That team really runs through Steve Kerr and maybe a little bit Mike Brown, who left to be the head coach for Sacramento. I don't think that's it. I know he's a bit more defensive minded, which would help, but just I don't really think he's that. I don't think he's all there in terms of being a head coach. So no, I don't want that option.
Charles Lee.
He's a fast riser, and he was on Mike Budenholzer's staff. That's great. But Mike Budenholzer just got fired for being the first number 1 overall seed in quite some time to get bounced out of the playoffs in the first round. So maybe I don't want, that guy's assistant. Also, because his head coach got fired, maybe he might take the job in Milwaukee.
Well, according to reports from The Athletic and others, it looks like that they're going to be all three of these are going to be meeting with Tom Gores later this week. So, I mean, he may go to Milwaukee, but it seems like we're pretty far in the process. Finally, Kevin Ollie, UConn and overtime elite.
He did win a championship with UConn. I remember that championship. They were the Hungry Huskies. I remember Shabazz Napier talking about how they're not getting money at all to take care of themselves in the dorms, so they have to, save food as college athletes, which kind of help with the NIL deals today. But then he also had to leave because of NCAA violations. Overtime elite is a nice project, but I still don't want Kevin Ollie as my coach. Even at UConn, the reason why they won is because they had the better kids. It wasn't necessarily the better schemes. They just had better players. And when the players stopped being better, they had to let him go because he wasn't nearly as winning as before. And I feel like that's probably what's going to happen here is he's going to try to use some college schemes with some adults, and that just doesn't really fly. Taking a college coach and putting him in the pros always makes me uncomfortable because you deal with players differently. Like, you talk to an 18, 19-year-old a bit differently than the way you'd talk to a 26, 27-year-old. So people who are in the college ranks for so long start trying to talk to these grown men like kids, and it ends up not going very well. And vice versa. You bring a head coach into the college ranks, and they expect a bit more of these college kids who are coming off an AP Calc test. So yeah, the crossing leagues makes me nervous. I know he spent some time at overtime elite, but also he's still working with children. They're just really, really good kids who are contemplating skipping going to college, but they're still 18, 19, 20 years old. They have not fully mentally matured to the point of an NBA veteran. So taking someone from that experience and bringing him into the pros. I don't know. I know he's a former professional basketball player. I understand that. I know he can talk to the mind of a player, but just, I don't know. I feel like that works better for college than for the pros.
So I'm going to push back a little bit on that because, like, if you're in that transition space, like, I totally see what you're saying for a more developed team. But with this team, I mean, look, everybody is hoping to whatever they pray to or not pray to, that we sign Wembanyama and get him in the draft. He's not old, right? Like, he's in that age range.
It's different when you're talking to a college kid who's like in college and when you're talking to a 19-year-old who's worth $45 million. The money changes the kid from be like, yes, they're still 19, 20, 21 years old, but also they could just talk to the GM and be like, yo, this guy is sweating me, do something about it. And who's he going to listen to? His head coach or his number one overall pick?
So who do you want in there instead? Like, what are a couple other names you wish they were looking at?
I'm not sure right now. I'm truly not. I want someone who has a little bit of professional experience, maybe not even like the best. Like, I know Mike Brown, when he was a head coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers, was not a very good run. Like, he had LeBron, and when LeBron wasn't there, he was not good. And then when he was the coach of the Lakers, wasn't very good. He had LeBron for a minute, and then he wasn't good again. And then he went to the Golden State Warriors bench and kind of revitalized himself, kind of got his schemes back right. Like, I want someone who has some professional experience to, like, have some NBA schemes that might have worked at one point, even if they were centered around one player, but just something where, like, they've been a head coach before, so they know exactly how to handle when a team goes into a slump. I don't want an assistant coach who has been around a lot of teams like that and can't, not really sure of what to do.
Another basketball thing I wanted to mention really quick, and I know it's not all Detroit, but it's kind of connected to Detroit because it's Matt Ishbia and he owns United Wholesale Mortgage, and like so many people work for him. And, now we have 2 NBA teams that are owned by local mortgage magnates. And that whole incident with Jokic, it just kind of caught my attention because, I mean, look, it's kind of a run-of-the-mill thing. It's a kind of skirmish that, I think is going to be in and out of the news pretty quick. I think it's notable because I think it's a little bit of a look into how I think Matt Ishbia is going to be a different kind of owner for the Suns. And I wonder what kind of energy that's going to bring around because, you and I were talking off air. He actually understands the game. He may not have been the best player when he played, but he understands the game, and he knew full well what he did on the side of the court over the weekend. He knew full well what he did.
I mean, it could make him into Mark Cuban when the Mavericks were good and he was an annoying owner, but he put the energy in the building. Or it could be, Mark Cuban now when the Mavericks are bad and he's just that annoying owner with a bad team. You kind of have to see where it goes from there. But yeah, he's fully aware of what he did. For those who don't know, Denver Nuggets were playing against the Phoenix Suns in the playoffs last night. A ball bounced out of bounds. The Nuggets like to run a fast-paced game. They have to get the ball back in play really quickly, throw it up the court, get easy fast break buckets. Matt Ishbia was holding on to the ball. Nikola Jokic tried to grab it from him. Matt Ishbia knocked it further into the stands. Jokic went to go grab for it, bumped Matt Ishbia, who fell backwards, threw his hands up and made a face, which let me know right there that while Jokic is huge, he did not bump him very hard because nobody gets pushed backwards and throws their arms up as they're falling backwards like they're a Ken doll. Like, that's not a real thing.
And he landed square in his seat, too. That's even funnier.
He landed like when you throw a horseshoe around like a spike and it just hits perfectly. Like, that's how he fell back. But most owners would, oversell, or they would not do that. The fact that he's played at a high level, NCAA championship with Michigan State in 2000, shows that, like, he knows what you don't get to be a walk-on for a time as a basketball team unless you are very gritty and you understand the sport of basketball. Like, you're not going to play, but you need to know, like, what you're doing. So, yeah, he knows what he's doing. He knew that if he delayed the ball getting back into play, then the Nuggets couldn't get the ball up the court. It also shows a double standard because if he was a normal fan, he is getting kicked out so fast because even though the ball's out of bounds, the ball is still in play. If you delay the player getting the ball back into play, that you cannot come back and watch the game. But because he is the owner of that team and also of that building, in theory, I don't think he would do this, but in theory, he could be like, everyone out of here. Everyone leave my building, which is fiscally really, really stupid. But they're like, you know what? We're not gonna, hey, he touched the ball? Yeah, you get to go back to your seat, sir. Sorry. I mean, it shows buying power, man. If you're worth as much as he is, you can get away with interrupting the flow of the game a little bit.
So after all those words, Fletcher, I just noticed something. We both noticed something here on the Twitter while recording, that Matt Ishbia has said some words. Great win for the Suns last night in an amazing series so far. That should be and isn't the only story. Suspending or fining anyone over last night's incident would not be right. I have a lot of respect for Jokic and don't want to see anything like that. Excited for Game 5. Go Suns. So I guess this really is kind of tied up with a bow, at least, hopefully.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was saying is I don't really think anyone should be suspended for this. I mean, the punishment already happened. Jokic got a technical foul. They hit the free throw, and that's it.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't go any further than that.
All right, let's talk Panthers really quick. They seem to start real strong, but these last couple of games at Ford Field, not the strongest performance.
Yeah, I don't know what it is those first two games. Like, they were doing really well. They were just mowing over their opponents. And last week against the Generals, like, DeAndre Johnson came out and just kind of ran the show against them. And then this week, same thing happens with the Memphis Showboats. Their quarterback just decides, like, I'm going to take over. They lose very handily 29-10 to the point where, like, fans were, I mean, it's good to see this because fans were booing, which is not good to see the fans boo, but it's good to see there's enough fans there where the boos matter. It's also good, not great because it's bad, but good that when you're walking out, the little kids are like, man, the game got out of control because of this. And like, you have kids talking about your game, which means like people care. It's not like people are just leaving like that sucked and was over, but people care. But unfortunately, we got to get them to care after a victory and not a defeat. And one way to make sure people don't come to your things when you lose at home and win away, because then they just won't come to the home games anymore. Right now, Michigan is 2-2, 2 wins on the road, 2 losses at home. Their issues really seem to be their offensive line, just are getting no push at all. The running game has to work because the backs need to be quicker. But like, if it's just straight up pound the ball down the middle of the field, they're getting no push. Joshua Love, who set the record for most completion percentage in a game in the USFL, his passes are getting batted down the line of scrimmage. And he's 6 foot, so he's been the small side for a professional quarterback. Either start him from further back so he can throw the ball and not have it get batted down, or switch to the taller Carson Strong, who's a taller quarterback, 6'3", 6'4", hadn't had any passes batted down, but in 2 games I've watched Josh Love, he's had like 7 or 8 passes batted down the line of scrimmage. Like, it's to the point to where it's like, stop, like seriously stop, because fans know what's going to happen. He drops back, defensive linemen put their hands down, see him throw, put their hands up. There's nothing you can do to stop him from batting the ball down unless you want to move him further back, because offensive linemen cannot hold their arms down or else it's a holding penalty 10 yards back the other way. When the defense knows that they can really just commit to the run and then just have their defenders put their arms up to bat the ball down, like, it really takes away half your playbook. The Panthers have to figure that out going forward because the atmosphere is still pretty fun. I mean, there's still some kind of cheesy gimmicks, which I know they're doing really for the kids, but like, the atmosphere is still fun. Like, it's, again, good thing, bad thing. You don't really want to hear your home fans boo, but if they're booing loud enough to where you can look up and be like, wow, it's kind of full in here, that's a good thing, in my opinion. Just, it won't be good next week if you keep losing the same way.
Well, it's a little bit different what you're saying than there was a writer for the Free Press last week who basically just slammed the Panthers. They were just like, they're back home, but don't expect the area to notice. It's a piece by this guy named Rainer Sabin. And he just spent like 1,000 words saying how no one's going to care about the Panthers. This whole thing that it just doesn't matter, that it can't get out of, the NFL shadow, all this other stuff. You're telling me that people were actually like enjoying it and talking about it.
Like, I'm not saying you're going to get 20,000 people to go watch a game. No. Like, he's expecting it to be like, oh, like the Lions, there's going to be 60, there's not going to be, might not even be 10,000 people at a game. But those that are there, they're engaged. Like, there are people who are paying attention to the sport. There are people who are missing the big screen camera because they're busy watching what's happening on the field. Like, that's how people are engaged. Yes, sir, you have the people who want to dance to be on camera, but a lot of people are looking at the game, focused on what's happening. Their kids are engaged with Big E, the WWE star who's going to be the MC for all the Panthers home games. And just, yeah, like, people care.
Thinking this is going to be like the Lions, I think, is a ill-informed take, right?
I think that's where he was coming from, is like, it's going to be, no one's going to notice because, yeah, if you're expecting to be like the Lions coming here and getting 50,000, no, it's not going to be like that. Nothing in the USFL is going to be like that ever. It's not, and it's not marketed to be like that. It's marketed to be the spring version tune-up to the NFL season. Like, it's not supposed to be like that because they're honestly using players that are, I hate to say this, but inferior to those in the NFL, because if they were not as inferior, they'd be on NFL rosters right now. And they're
A lot of
trying to do their
aspirational
best.
players, right? A lot of
Yeah,
players
they're trying to do their best to work their way onto NFL rosters. To then expect an NFL product is silly because these are not NFL players yet. Some of them used to be and not anymore. Some of them are pre-NFL players. Some of them just won't be. But like, it's really here to like be entertainment and watching these guys go after it. So if you're expecting it to be 20, 25, 30, you're going to get your bubble burst for sure. For what it is, I think it's good. And this is just me because I've been watching DCFC and watching other second and lower division sports in this region, in this state, in this country. So I understand second division sports don't really draw the numbers that top divisions do. And you shouldn't expect them to do that because it's a different style of play. But for what it is, I think it's really good, and I think it's a pretty positive addition. Like when you're seeing people in Sterling Heights taking their dogs for walks wearing Michigan Panthers shirt, I think you're making some sort of progress. I'm not saying that might be the one super fan in the entire region. You don't know. But the fact that they have shirts worn out in public, even if they are free shirts thrown out to the crowd, lets you know that someone actually cares somewhat. That article, I would just take that with a grain of salt because I think he stepped in there expecting it to be like, oh, it's going to be loud. It's going to be people with painted faces doing It's not that.
Well, and they just started.
This is their second year, their first year back in Michigan. I was literally talking to their PR person who's like, sorry, we're a bit behind. I'm like, you guys are this is your second full week at Ford Field. I understand entirely why you guys are behind. It's totally okay. People are willing to give you more chances to like breathe and do things because you guys are still adjusting to being in this area, especially after everyone being in one state and one stadium all of last year. Now you have to actually fly and travel to do stuff. I understand. It's totally fine. Just take your time doing stuff and just get it right.
Yeah, I think that they're looking to do, and they have the financial backing to do it. Let's talk Detroit City FC. It was, as Norris Howard and I said on the field, a non-win for Detroit City. A point is a point is a point, and I will take it. There were a couple of flashes of hope I liked. There are some things that I think we still need to kind of tweak on. But overall, a solid crowd at Keyworth and a point. And at this point, I feel like we're almost in I hate to say it, but like a mid-season rebuild of sorts, because we got to figure out kind of what the future is for this team.
Yeah, I won't lie. I'm glad Lay scored. Truly I am, because I've been one of his loudest critics when it comes to taking shots from deep.
And it was a solid goal, no doubt.
There's been many, many, many times on this show and on Twitter where I've been like, he's shooting from deep again. Like, God, like hide the kids behind the net. But like to that game, he looked up, took one touch and said, this is going bottom bins, and hit it right where it needed to go. Keepers did not stand a chance. And you watch from behind, you watch the bend on the ball, there's one curve and it's curved right to the bottom corner. That was a tremendous strike. But maybe let's leave it so that he doesn't have to do that so often. Like, they need more offensive pressure. Lay played his best game ever as a professional soccer player. Statistically, says Fatma, that was his best game ever as a professional soccer player. He was doing the things he normally does, just he got a goal and was more positive, which was good to see. I guess it needed to be so because Maxey was unavailable for the game.
I hear he got injured in training.
Yeah, they needed Lay to step up and fill a role because typically Tommy McCabe and Lay play the same position. So if they're both in there together, I guess Lay's the more attacking of the two. It was good to see Skage make a few runs early on. It was good to see him paired up with Yazid. Didn't really see what we expected to see. Ben Morris probably shouldn't be the starter anymore, in my opinion, because he's had enough time to work out the kinks, and they're just not being worked out. And if you're going to be a pacey hitman type of forward who is going to run behind people and score, but you're not scoring, maybe you should be on the bench until later when teams are tired, and then you run at tired people because you're running at, not tired people and you're not doing so great. And once again, it was another handball that did them in. It was a harsh handball, but if I were playing in that game, I'd want that call. It was harsh, definitely. Michael Bryant did not see where the ball was. His arm was out after coming down after jumping. But if I were the opposing team, I'd be screaming at the official to not get that call. So yeah, they got the call, and of course, that man again, who everyone yells at me for mentioning, but can't seem to stop, Dario Suarez stepped up and scored his 5th goal against Detroit City in his illustrious career against them, which is a lot. It's tied for most.
I wish we'd just sign him and get rid of that bugaboo, and then he'd actually help us, because we need that kind of power. It won't happen, but...
He doesn't fit into Detroit's style of play, so, no, that would not... They'd be playing him as a wingback, and he'd be like, let me out of here. And I honestly would not fault him at all Because one of the worst things about being a forward and being told you have to track back defensively is you have to track back defensively.
It seemed like the first half was really solid. There was a nice press with that. They weren't sitting back as much. The second half was a lot more choppy, in my opinion. That first half was really strong. I look at it and I go, we just need to keep the pressure up. Like, I don't know if like sitting back and waiting for everything is going to work, because it didn't work the first whatever games. And I think the players look like they're having more fun when they're going up there and attacking and doing stuff. Even though that's not the scheme and whatever, I don't really care. Like, at this point, we need to make changes.
The problem with that is when you're so stuck on playing a low block defensive type of style of game where you don't allow teams to run at you like that, it keeps games low. If you up, you leave big gaps, and you have to count on yourself to have to try to counterattack and get back after you fail. And that leads to a lot of fast break goals. The flip side is you have teams complete more passes than you attempt again. And like, that's an embarrassing thing to see. Tulsa completed 525 passes. Detroit attempted 353. So almost 100 more passes they completed than you attempted through the entire game, that's not good. It means you were basically saying, all right, you get to keep the ball for most of the game, and we're going to stand back here and just not let you go by us. And we'll just sit here and wait. I know that's part of Trevor's MO, is to try to counterattack when he can. I don't think he has a full roster to play the way that, a more offensive type of game. But I think, like you said, I think the players enjoy getting out and being more on the pressing foot, more so than just being on the receiving foot. Because, no one wants to have punches thrown at them and then try to counter. Sometimes you want to throw a punch yourself. You want to be able to step up and say, we're taking charge. We're taking some offensive pressure. We're making some shots. We're making some plays. And it doesn't really seem like that's going to be in the cards for them for a lot of these games, which will be a little frustrating, if you're going to be honest, as a fan of the sport, because, it's not really fun to watch your team sit back and just get shelled and hope that they find a ray of hope to counterattack from.
Yeah. Tampa Bay's up next.
They escaped with, a dodgy penalty. Again, the Rowdies are not the Rowdies of before, but they are coming out on a 2-game win streak. Of course, one of those was against Detroit. They beat Phoenix Rising 2-0. So they'll be coming into it with a little bit of, chest pumped out a little bit. I still can't see Detroit beating them. I can't. That's just mainly not even because they're the Rowdies, but because they're coming off of a winning streak. Their players are playing pretty well right now. And I can't really say the same for all of Detroit's players.
Well, yeah, Tampa Bay has already shot back up to 4th. They had that bad time. And I know it's limited points, limited games, but they've just a couple of wins has really changed their fortunes.
Yeah, it really shows you how tight it is at the top throughout the entire table, because at one point they were right next to DCFC. 2 wins later, they're back in middle of the playoff contention. So
what my worry is that if we don't assemble some wins soon, we're going to be too far out, because there's starting to be a distance. Us and Hartford are at the very basement, and then it just starts adding on,
That's what I was going to say, is if Detroit can figure out some way to get some wins, turn some ties into wins, some losses into ties, they might be able to try to squeak their way back into the playoff. I know John Morrissey for USL Tactics has Detroit at like a 39% chance to make the playoffs, which I thought seemed a bit high. But the points aren't that far away. If they can just find a way to get some points, get something kind of cooking going forward, they might have a chance to potentially squeak their way in again.
Well, that's going to be a little challenging, because we got Tampa Bay, and then we got San Antonio, the Legion, and then Charleston. So the next 4 games are a real gauntlet to see where we're at, because all those teams are very solid right now.
Yeah, they're not beating San Antonio. I know we're going to do a preview and everything, but I'm just going to let everyone know they're not beating San Antonio. That's like throwing wood into a wood chipper. That's just not going to happen. Legion are a very good team, but for some reason, Detroit seems to make them and their star player invisible. I don't know what it is at all, but Enzo Martinez is an amazing player for this league. But when he plays against Detroit, he looks like every other player. It's so weird to see. I watch clips of him and I'm like, this guy's great. He gets to Keyworth and I'm like, where'd this guy go? Where did this guy go?
Do we need to figure out a way, though, to win somewhere in this gauntlet? Because let me tell you this, going through 4 more games, if we come out of there with only a couple of points or something, that's not going to be good.
I think there's a chance they could get something against Legion, potentially. Charleston's going to be tough. Ben Pierman's going to have him ready to play. He does not want to lose to Detroit City FC. I know he has massive respect for the program, but he does not want to lose to them. He'll be fighting like hell to make sure his team's ready to play so they don't lose to these fans. If I was predicting it, I think they probably get 4 points. Lose to Tampa, lose to San Antonio, a draw against Charleston, and a win against Legion, which 4 points is not great, but 4 points is better than what you've been getting. You got to crawl before you walk.
All right, well, Fletcher Sharpe, it is so good to talk to you. A bit of a longer episode than usual, but we had a lot to cover, man.
Yeah, I'm always good to talk about sports in the Metro Detroit area.
For sure, for sure. As always, feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Thank you to our members, patreon.com/dailydetroit, for supporting the show. It is much appreciated. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Fletcher Sharpe.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.